'cause I love this land. It takes my breath away.
Welcome to Texas 10. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Steve. And for the last 5 years, we've traveled around Texas.
We have, Steve. In fact, there are 254 counties in Texas, if you don't know, and we only have 20 left to go.
234. That's a lot of counties we visited. But the first thing I want to say today is that if you want to know about those counties in detail before an episode drops about them, go to texas10.com and look for the field guides. You'll find out everything you need to know if you want to visit a county, where the museums are, the best restaurants, the best places to stay, if you're an RVer, the best campgrounds, all of that stuff. So go to texas10.com.
All right. What are we going to talk about today, Steve?
Well, when we travel around Texas, I like to take pictures. I've got like 25,000 pictures of Texas.
It's
on
a
my
bug
computer.
from the family.
Right.
Yes.
And one of the things that it just evokes something in me is I take pictures of churches.
Yep. And I do too. I'm the iPhone picture taker. He's with the real camera picture taker. And, there's something about a simple country church. And churches in communities, especially, I've grown up in Texas all my life, and they are the center of the community. I grew up visiting my mama and papa in Chandler, Texas. It's a little bitty town, and going to church with my mama and papa. And mama was one of the founding members of the First Baptist Church in Chandler, Texas. And it was always a wonderful memory for me to go to that little church.
Well, when you say they're centering, that definitely is, I think, the right definition for it. And it informs what you do on the weekend. A lot of places in Texas, it informs what you do on Wednesday night.
Oh, Wednesday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night, I was at church. It was youth choir, GAs, and all the things that our church did. It was really just a part of my life. That's all my parents' friends were through the church.
And it's interesting to me, as we travel around, we go to these towns, and generally, this changes a little bit, but even in the smallest towns, you find a Baptist church, a Methodist church, a Church of Christ, and a Catholic church.
Yes, and the Church of Christ, it seems like they're always triangular shaped.
I think they've got a franchise doing their their stuff. But when you talk about the shapes and whatnot, that is something that I just love to take pictures of.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, so I grew up in the Methodist church. My mom was a church lady. She was the office manager for several United Methodist churches. And it was a really important part of our life, just as yours. And recently, the United Methodist Church has gone through some turmoil, and churches are breaking off. And we were in Driftwood, Texas, which is a beautiful area.
Yeah.
And I was out just taking pictures, and I came upon the Driftwood Church, and it had been a United Methodist Church, and it had left the United Methodist Church. And before, I guess they don't have their new signage in or whatnot. And they had just scraped off the United Methodist part of it. And I got to tell you, out of all the joy we've had visiting around Texas, I was really, really sad at that point, because I don't want to get into the whys and wherefores of the split, but that's a community coming apart.
Right.
And so, that really hurt me. But I will say we've seen a lot more coming together than coming apart.
Well, in Texas, there's just such a historical foundation, too. Whenever you go to these old country churches, often they have a historical marker, and it might talk about with the United Methodist Church, there were the old, the circuit riders, and they would have ministers. The church in that community might not have been big enough for one minister, so that minister, the first Sunday of the month, he'd be in one small town. The next Sunday of the month, they'd be in the next. But in all the churches, they have such remarkable stories to tell about how the people came to the community, and again, how the church was where they came together.
Well, and I think you can really see it in what are some of Texas's most famous churches. They're called the painted churches.
Oh, yes.
And they're in central Texas, and generally they are in German or Czech communities. There's 8 or 9 of them, I think. And one we've been to was near Giddings.
Right. It's in Servin, Texas.
Right. And so, I mean, talk a little bit about what makes a painted church.
Well, when you walk in, you will see they have painted the ceilings, and it's not. When I first heard the term painted churches, I think I expected something much more. They're actually much simpler than I thought they would be. But all in the interior, they have painted sometimes, the story of Christ, or you might see angels, but they're just really, really beautiful.
Well, and we were in the service, or I was in the service, and you were with me, and we were in Europe for 3.5 years, making the world safe for democracy, and we went to a lot of the great churches in the world, in Notre Dame, and all the grand cathedrals, the Vatican, all of those, and they are amazing. The artwork, and you're talking about Michelangelo and Da Vinci, all those sort of people, but I prefer the simple, I mean, and the painted churches are a great example of how you can capture that in a small setting, and the craftsmanship and the work that these then immigrants, that they came from Germany or Czechoslovakia and put the work in to make these churches, and they're just sort of small replicas of those things. It's phenomenal.
And the stained glass. And sometimes I like the simple stained glass. Like you said, it may just be colored pieces of glass in it, and they have just the simple shape of the church windows. And it's just this simple, iconic white church. Those are my favorite.
Well, speaking of sort of simple, iconic white churches, we've seen a lot of them, and they're all over Texas. The one that I liked is right outside of Burnett, near Inks Lake. It's called Hoover's Chapel, and it sits in a wildflower.
Oh, yeah. There were just wildflowers everywhere, and it was a little run down. You could see some of the paint chipping a little bit, but it's just this simple church. And the other thing that I love about these old country churches is they often have a cemetery right next to it. And so the people, they lived there, and then that's where they buried their people. And the whole thing is just this picturesque, little beautiful plot of land with a church.
There's so much, when you see it, you just feel a little nostalgic for a simpler time, I think, is where, Sundays now, a lot of people, it's not about church and then a chicken fried dinner and then going back to church. There's activities on Sunday. You might be shopping, it's the NFL or whatever.
There's another church that really struck me when we were in Amarillo. Was it Amarillo, where we were looking at the photography exhibit, and we saw the aerial view, and it was this POW camp. And so we thought we were going to go find that. And we drove and found it, and there was this beautiful church there that the POWs built, right?
Right. So that was in Hereford when we finally found it. And yes, it was actually at the Panhandle Plains Museum in Randall, Randall County, that we saw the picture. And so during World War II, we took prisoners, and the Italian prisoners, a lot of them were shipped to Hereford, Texas, which I'm sure was culture shock for them.
Maybe just a little.
But and they had to have a place to worship, and so they built it on their own. Again, they had craftsmen that were part of their group, and man, they built just a great, stunning little chapel. And what's really stunning is it's on a ranch's land at this point, and the ranchers by themselves said, no, we're not going to work this area of the land in honor of that particular endeavor. And it really was.
It's still
moving.
there.
It's a little hard to find.
But we persevered. We found it. Do you remember the time, this was a long time ago, where I did see a historical marker of an old church? Kendall was with us. And we went to search for it, and it took us like an hour. We went back roads. But anytime you find one of these churches, it's worth it. And I always try to go in. They're quiet and they're small. And I can just picture the people that are there. Rockport had another beautiful one.
Right. So in Rockport, I think you're talking about the Schoenstatt Shrine.
Yes.
Which is it's a Catholic organization, and they've got a really good idea because when they've got about 10 of these, and they're all by the oceans. And I think they figured it out. And again, it's a very simple. There's more woodwork in that one. And there's a great statue outside, and people come from all over the world just to sort of meditate and sort of get away from life for a little bit and center themselves again.
We're almost out of time, but there's two more I want to talk about. We talk about the simple country churches, but here in Texas, we also have the mission style churches. I mean, honestly, if you go to San Antonio, there's the beautiful missions, but the Alamo was a church.
Right. And so that's 100% correct. Those were country churches a long time ago. Now cities may have built up around them. And there was one near El Paso. It's called San Elizaro, I think.
Yeah.
That was just a perfect example of a mission style church.
Is beautiful.
And they had the little parapet on all of those, the thing that goes across the top, which the Alamo is one of the most famous buildings in the world, and that's there. The interesting thing is that parapet wasn't there when the Battle of Alamo was fought. It was added
crazy.
later. So all of that goes to say,
I have to interrupt you.
Okay.
There is one more.
Right.
It is probably my favorite church, and it goes to your culture. Steve's family is Norwegian, and the Old Rock Church outside of Clifton in Cransfield's Gap is one of the most beautiful little churches I've ever seen. It's up on a hill. I don't think they still don't have electricity in it. They only have certain services there. I mean, they may have some electricity, but I don't know that they run it much. But it's rock. It is the most beautiful setting in church.
It's the epitome of what we've been talking about. I think it does. So that community is Norwegian. I think Clifton is the Norwegian capital of Texas, and it is. Settlers came, they built it. You can imagine the work that went into it. And like you said, it's up on a hill, so it overlooks stuff. It does have a cemetery like you were talking about, and it's beautifully kept. They have a different place where the congregation still meets, and they have special services there. And it's probably one of my 3 or 4 favorite buildings in Texas. It is unbelievable.
Mine too.
It's just gorgeous. And it sort of brings me full circle that as much as we have problems and we have disaffiliations and whatnot, that there's still a centering effect of that. And it still talks about the community. And church is so much a part. We're in the middle of the Bible Belt, and church is so much a part of Texas life that I feel like as we've traveled around and seeing these places, it's really driven home that. And I'll never stop looking in and taking pictures.
So when you're out on the road, stop. Look into some of these beautiful little churches. And if you want to know where some are, go to texas10.com. We have a travel guide, and we will have the names of so many of the churches that we love and that we've seen. And we hope that you will take out on your own and go in search of a beautiful little church on a Sunday afternoon.
And if you haven't found one, or if you go to one, then let us know. Go to our Facebook page at Texas 10 or our Instagram at Texas 10 Podcast, and let us know. Post something. We'd love to see your beautiful church.
Thanks. We hope you will join us again on another time at texas10.com.
Bye.
Bye.
And I love this land. Oh, it takes my breath away. From the Palo Duro to the Gulf Coast Plain, from the heart of the hill country to the piney wood shade. I love this land. It takes my breath away.